and hurried to the library to fetch her. But by the time Grace reached the marina, Dan was gone. A woman had pulled up to the curb, and Dan had climbed into the vehicle and driven away, never to be seen or heard from again. In retrospect, she'd come to believe that Dan was providing her with the answers she so desperately needed. She could think of no other reason he would mysteriously arrive at the busiest place in town, where he was most likely to be seen and recognized. The library where she worked was less than 2 blocks away. Clearly, her husband lacked the courage to tell her there was someone else. Instead, he'd chosen another, crueler way to inform her. He'd humiliated her in front of the entire community. Grace knew without being told that everyone in Cedar Cove pitied her. That sighting had settled the matter in Grace's mind. Whatever love she still felt for Dan died that afternoon. Until then, she hadn't wanted to believe there was someone else. Even when the visa bill showed up with a hefty charge from a local jeweler, Grace had refused to accept that her husband was involved with another woman. Dan just wasn't the kind of man who would be unfaithful to her. She'd trusted him. Not anymore. "Are you okay, Mom?" Maryellen asked, touching her arm. Grace's hand tightened around the pen. "Fine," she snapped, instantly regretting her tone. She hadn't meant to sound so sharp. Her daughter looked away. Grace focused on the divorce papers, hesitated a moment longer, and then with haste signed her name. "I'll see that this is filed immediately," Mark Spellman said. Grace relaxed, leaning back in her chair. This was all there was to it? You could end a 35-year marriage simply by signing your name? "That's it?" "Yes. Since you haven't heard from Daniel in 5 months, I don't foresee any legal complications. The divorce should be final in a few weeks." Almost 4 decades tossed out the window like so much garbage. The good years, the bad years, the lean ones, the years they'd scrimped and saved. Like all couples, they'd had their share of problems, but despite everything, they'd held their marriage together. Until now. Until this. "Mom?" Maryellen whispered. Grace nodded abruptly, surprised at the emotion that choked her. She'd shed all the tears she intended to. In the months since Dan's disappearance, Grace had deeply grieved the loss of her marriage and the man she thought she knew. The truth of it was, she no longer had a choice. Divorce had become inevitable. It was essential that she protect her financial interests. According to the attorney, she couldn't afford the luxury of doing nothing. Her legal situation was one thing, and she dealt with that. But the emotional impact had left her badly shaken. Despite her resolve, the grief hadn't diminished, and the humiliation of what Dan had done was with her constantly. Everyone in town was aware of her circumstances and the fact that her husband had walked out on her. Slowly, Grace set the pen aside. "I'll wait to hear from you, then," she said to her attorney, rising out of the chair. Maryellen stood with her. The attorney, a young man closer to Maryellen's age than her own, escorted them to the office door. He began to say something, then merely looked down and murmured a brief goodbye. Outside his small home office, the sky had turned a depressing leaden gray. Grace felt a burden of sadness settle over her. She'd known this appointment wasn't going to be easy, but she hadn't expected it to exact such a toll on her self-confidence. Maryellen glanced at her watch. "I need to get back to the gallery." "I know," Grace said. Her daughter had offered to go to this appointment with her for moral support. Although she was grateful, Grace had thought it unnecessary. But Maryellen was right. Her daughter was divorced, too. Maryellen had married young and unwisely, and the marriage had ended in less than a year. The experience had so biased her against men she'd steered away from relationships ever since. Grace had tried to assure her that she'd meet a wonderful man someday, a man waiting for someone exactly like her. Maryellen had considered that naive and refused to listen, and now Grace understood why.